Hello, Happy New Year, and you're very welcome along to the RTÉ Rugby podcast this week. Neil Treacy alongside Fiona Hayes. A little bit later on in the show as well, I'll be speaking to Ireland and Leinster prop Andrew Porter, but for now, Fiona is with me. Munster assistant coach, contact and breakdown skills coach Fiona Hayes for Munster ahead of the Vodafone Women's Interprovincial Series coming up, starting this weekend against Ulster. Fiona, Happy New Year. How are you set for the opening round this week?
Happy New Year, Neil. Yeah, looking forward to it. It's come very fast upon us, I suppose, with the AIL season kind of flowing through. We weren't sure about the Interpros early days. So look, it's been a very, very busy Christmas training wise and New Year. The girls, I suppose, are looking sharp because they're on the back of that season, AIL season. So they've just come out of playing straight into full on training. So it's good. I'm looking forward to it. Now there's going to be a good standard of rugby, I'm sure, I'd imagine.
Yeah, you said obviously busy Christmas training wise and stuff like that. When did Niamh Briggs have everyone out running off the turf?
She'd us all slogging early. She'd even the coaches running off the turkey at one stage. No, so they got Stephen's day off, and it was bright and early the next morning. So there was no one allowed to go too mad for that Munster Leinster game. There was a close eye on all quarters in Thomond Park, but no, look, the girls are good. They've been doing their own stuff outside as well, and we trained right up until maybe 2 or 3 days before Christmas, did a few days off, and it was straight back in with a bit of running straight away. So it's been hard for them now, to be honest. But they've been just amazing, and they've been training really well.
Have you had any warm up games? I know Ulster and Leinster played a friendly there a few days ago.
Yeah, no, so we didn't. We had some internal games, and we had a look at players in different positions. Look, we kind of decided that we'd go hard in our own training sessions rather than get those games, because it's going, as I said, it's come so quick upon us. So we'll have Ulster probably have that, not that bit of, we talked about it training last week, that Ulster have that game under their belt now, and we have to get out of the gates running nice and early. We can't be having cobwebs after that Christmas hangover.
And then in terms of like the players you have at your disposal, I know there's like, from doing Leinster's media stuff yesterday, they've a couple of their IRFU contracted players, and a third Leah Tarpey, who could be back if she's back from a calf injury. Do you have many of your Irish players available?
Yeah, so they kind of came in towards maybe just before Christmas. They were released to us. So we have Enya Breen, Maeve O'Leary, and Dorothy Wall as well, that have come down. And look, they've been immense when they've come down. You can see the standard from that kind of professionalised environment that they've been training up in Dublin. And when they came back, they kind of really brought that to the session and push the girls along, and you could really see that even the language they're using is immense around the girls. They're getting everyone going, and they brought a great buzz down with them.
And it's Munster and Ulster and Connacht really that face the issue. There's so many of the players now just based in Dublin with Dublin clubs living there as well. Like, is that making training and gatherings like that a little bit of a challenge, where you're asking players to come down? Well, not all players, but a lot of players. You're asking them to come down from Dublin or the outskirts of Dublin a couple of times a week, I'd imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. There is issues, and suppose this is what it's all going to be working towards now. As I said, they were only released to us just before Christmas, and we probably had been training early days, maybe since September or during the summer. We've done a few sessions. So it's about building those relationships now with the RFU, which I think has been really, really good. There's been a lot of communication. I suppose the girls, it's laid out early days as well, that people might make trainings with the girls. And look, when they get down, the sessions are high tempo and intense. So it's kind of trying to build that amongst the squad now, for everyone to realise that we're in a different world, and that there's some contracted players that mightn't be able to train twice a week, but it's not that they're not training up in Dublin. But I think it's worked really well.
Yeah, and then just finally the layout of things, the way the season is going at the moment, like it's coming into a really busy period. We've got Interpros, then pretty much the last weekend of the month, we're into this Celtic Cup competition with the combined provinces, which I'm sure every player across those 4 provinces in the next few weeks are going to be playing for their place on that, or wanting to show themselves off. And then after that, you're into a Six Nations campaign. So there's a huge shop window for all the players coming up in the next few weeks.
Yeah, and it's really exciting for them all. This Celtic Cup, it's obviously added in kind of in the last year to calendar, but I think it's really going to push on those interpros, and we're going to see the standard getting better and better, because essentially, the likes of Greg McWilliams and especially Briggs as well, who's involved in the coaching staff, she's there, she's seen these players in the interpros, and it'll be making a big push. If someone can perform in that high tempo, intense environment, they'll be making a big shove to get on that Celtic Cup squad. And I think Greg has said that, it's open. If you can play really well, there's a chance that you will be seen, and who knows what will happen then when it comes to Six Nations time, if you can push yourself into games like that.
Yeah, certainly is. So it's Ulster this Saturday at Musgrave Park. What time's kickoff?
I'll probably be killed. I think it's about 3:45 around that. I'll have to recheck. I was never great.
Get in for 3 down at Musgrave Park, and you'll be safe anyway. That's what
I'll be there nice and early just in case.
All right, Fiona. Well, very best of luck with that, and I'm sure we'll be checking in with you and with Niamh as well over the next few weeks on how things are going. So that's the Women's Interprovincial Series getting underway. We've got Leinster against Connacht, that's on Saturday, and then Munster and Ulster as well, also on Saturday down in Musgrave Park. On to things URC and probably Six Nations related at this stage, because we're getting into that window. It's less than 5 weeks now until Ireland take on Wales in the opener in Cardiff on the 5th of February. And we've got a Johnny Sexton injury to worry about. It seems like an annual event now, but Johnny Sexton, obviously, as people have seen by now, he had that pretty nasty facial injury against Connacht's clash of heads with Jared Butler when he was trying to tackle the Connacht number 8. And like Fiona, there was a visible dent pretty much left on his face. And Leinster confirmed as of yesterday that he's had a procedure on it. They haven't gone into too much details on what it is or what the timeline is, but it just feels safe to assume, Fiona, at this stage, like if we're talking a procedure on a cheekbone injury that looks pretty sore and pretty bad, to be honest, we're talking a 4 to 5 week window for the Six Nations. He's got to be in that kind of a time frame or bracket where he's definitely a doubt for the opening games against Wales on the 4th of February, which is the Saturday, and then 7 days later, France at home on the 11th.
Yeah, you would imagine that they definitely have to be planning ahead. Obviously you'll have that week off then that might change things around, but you would be imagining that Andy Farrell is definitely looking at where he's going to go now with his starting 10 and who he's going to have on the bench, because I'm sure the medical staff obviously have contacted Andy Farrell, and he knows probably more detail about the timeline. But with an injury such as that, it's very hard. Obviously he can trail on his feet and he can do all that type of training, but he wouldn't be able to do full contact at all, as we know, with a facial injury. So I would imagine that he'll be kind of thereabouts in camp, but probably won't see him for the first 2 games.
It obviously then brings up the question, there's a number 10 jersey and there's a number 22 jersey to fill out for, well, likely there will be for those opening 2 games. Who's going to be wearing them?
Have we been talking about this? I think every time there's a Johnny injury. I think if he's injury free, the way Farrell has been doing his business and naming squads, I think you're going to probably see Carberry as the starter. He's had a couple of good games with Munster, hasn't had an excellent game, I don't think. We haven't seen him fully back in the day, himself. Probably the game against Leinster, he might have actually gotten a bit, I thought he played a bit deep, which was unusual for him. I thought he'd been mixing up his game where he's playing on the gain line. He looks to be playing a bit deeper, and it probably wasn't his best game confidence-wise. But I would imagine that he'll be up at camp, and he'll be Andy Farrell will be trying to build his confidence up to give him that start in Thursday against Wales as well, which is a good game to kick it off. If it was against France, I know he's started against France before, but if it was against France, it might be a different ball game. But I think we'll see Joey there. And then you're looking at the battle of, I suppose it's either Ross Byrne, I think, or Crowley. And Ross Byrne with that kick for Ireland has really kind of stamped and shown what he can do from the boot. And that's someone you would like to have on the bench as well.
Yeah, and there's a thing with Ross Byrne where I think the closer you get to a World Cup as well, and three and a half years ago, Ross Byrne, he wasn't the, he's not the shiny option. He's not the really, really tempting player that kind of just sucks you in. He's a very, very reliable, durable player. But the thing with a player like that is the closer you get to a World Cup, all of a sudden you look at that and you think, a guy that can play every single week and is probably going to put in your 7.5 out of 10 performance, and you can kind of absolutely rely on him. He becomes very, very tempting as an option the closer you get to a World Cup, doesn't he?
But yeah, absolutely, and that's what you want.
Like the New Year's Day. Sorry to interrupt. The New Year's Day game against Connacht, for example, Leinster and Connacht. Like that was the first night off he was given all season. He wasn't even injured, he was available to play if needed. But obviously Leo Cullen decided he'd have Johnny Sexton starting because he'd rest him the week before, and Harry Byrne obviously needed a bit of game time. So they're in a position where they can actually rest Ross Byrne, who's played every single game so far this season, and he's going to be back this weekend. He's probably going to be starting against the Ospreys. He's just a very, very reliable and durable option, and you know what you're going to get out of him.
Exactly, you know what you want to get. A lot of ex-Leinster players would have, argued in the past that, when you're training with him, when you're around him, you see exactly what he can do, and they don't understand, I suppose, why he isn't valued as much by Farrell. But as an international coach, you want someone to bring, I suppose, that bit of lightning, or someone that can. We know what Ross Byrne can do, and he has an excellent game management. He plays the game. He plays excellently with Leinster. We see it week in, week out. We know Leo Cullen obviously has, a lot of respect for him and gives him that starting jersey. When his brother comes on, they actually work really well together. But I just think when you're coming up to World Cup, and especially in the Six Nations, his kicking game is what's invaluable to Ireland. And when you get to those tight games, we saw he done it. There's no pressure on his shoulders when he comes off those bench, and he needs to nail those kicks. And I think Six Nations times, we will see a lot Ireland probably taking a lot of those going for post when they're in those big games at home, especially against France and England. And a player like that to come on with a confidence, because he's playing confidently at Leinster, would be just exactly what Farrell needs.
But if we're thinking that Joey Carbery's probably favourite to be starting against Cardiff if Johnny Sexton's around, would you think 22 is going to be Ross Byrne, or is it Jack Crowley?
I think he might change it up. It depends. But I think definitely in those two opening games, I would imagine he's going to go with Ross Byrne, especially the France game. He probably, we've seen Crowley, he's gone back to Munster. He hasn't probably got as much game time as Farrell would have liked to see at 10. We saw him in a 12 a couple of times. So he's going to look at that when picking his squads. Ross Byrne is playing week in, week out. And I think to have that reliable guy on the bench is what Andy Farrell will be looking at. Now, also, he's looking at the World Cup ahead. So he might want to, you mightn't even see Carbery. Maybe Carbery could be on the bench and Crowley starting that first game. You just wouldn't know. He might want to try up these things, and it's the perfect time to put these guys in the cauldron and see, are they up to that? And that's what's going to happen in a World Cup if Johnny gets injured, or God forbid he doesn't even make the World Cup.
On Crowley, then, like, we've seen him play at 12 a few times in the last few weeks now. But just jumping out, like, it was his little break up the middle against Ulster, which absolutely flipped that game on its head. And I think we could probably safely say Munster were not going to get up. Like, they needed some little kind of a burst like that to get their way up the pitch, and it was he that provided it. And I know it was Ben Healy that finished it, but Crowley just seems to be continuing on that vein of form all season, where the confidence just seems to be building week on week. He had a couple of weeks playing in the centre where like there were difficult matchups for him and things like that, particularly the Northampton game. It was an awful day for him to be trying in there, and a couple of things didn't work out for him, but it hasn't knocked the confidence in any way. No,
and he's really exciting. I mean, I personally, I love watching him at a 10. That's exactly, you can see him, he's constantly thinking ahead. He's wondering what he can do with the ball. Sometimes maybe he's kicking game from hand at 10 might be 100% up to scratch, but it's only playing these big games, getting him in there. He get the feel for when it's on and when it's not on to kick. He's definitely done some lovely dinks over the top, and I just think he's really creative. He's really, really good footwork, and he's added, I suppose, to Munster. And he just, when he's playing at 10, I think we've seen a lot more go forward ball. Maybe, as I said, Joey sometimes been playing behind the gain line, and it's not kind of go forward ball, but it seems like Crowley's getting that out of the forwards. He's getting them on the gain line. It's that kind of attacking style. I do think obviously he's not as, that's what I'm saying about Ross Byrne. He hasn't got as many minutes as 10 as maybe Farrell would like to think, but he just offers so much. His footwork around, his confidence, everything about him is screaming up and coming to him. He just needs to be in there playing a little bit more game time to be at that level for international.
And then another 10 who it seems might be going a different way altogether in terms of Ireland ambitions, Ben Healy. So
yeah, it's
something that we've probably been talking about for a couple of years now, the prospect of him going over to Scotland. He's Scottish qualified, and they've been sniffing around him for a couple of years. This is probably the third season in a row where it's happened, where we've had these conversations. And Edinburgh's director of rugby, Mike Blair, he's come out in the last day or so and said, he is someone they're looking at. They are interested in him. Graham Rowntree, for example, last week said that Munster have a job in their hands to keep him. It probably was inevitable that something like this was going to be happening when you had 3 out halves at Munster who were all in a good age profile. Joey Carberry's still in the prime age-wise, kind of mid-late 20s. You've got Jack Crowley and Ben Healy, who are both early 20s. And obviously, it's always been hard to see Munster being able to keep all 3 of them long term.
Yeah, definitely. And I suppose when you look, Neil, this year as well, you probably would say he's like Healy haven't done very much, not much wrong. Has kind of, Crowley has just nipped ahead of him in the pecking order, especially with that emerging Ireland and stuff. So it's, when you're looking at that, so I think he obviously would have been adamant, I'm going to stay, I'm going to fight for my place, I'm second in line to Joey. There is a chance I could get a call up, and I suppose when that happens to a player, it's going to be very hard to hold on to that player. He obviously has stated before that he does, he has Irish ambitions, but you also want to play at an international level. You want to be going to these World Cups. You want to be playing Six Nations, and it's been 3 seasons now where he's been chased, and I suppose he hasn't fulfilled that Irish dream. Whereas they're probably, as we say over here, Plymouthing him over in Scotland and telling him, we can get you this and we'll get you on the pitch. And it seems like he would be a very good fit to their system. I was just thinking, and I was just stated to you earlier that you would wonder if there would be anything on Andy Farrell, if he might even call him up to camp, pre Six Nations, to get him into that training panel and see if he can, show him or chat him, try and get him to stay in the country, because injury wise, you just don't know what's going to happen, especially at 10. We've had tournaments where 2 10s have been out, wiped out 1 game. So it's it is a waiting game, but it also could be, your career could be over and you never might even have an international cap. So it's something he's going to have to think hard and long about, but it would be a real shame to lose a player like that. I saw him down in that Munster game as well, Neil, and against South Africa down in Cork, and I just thought he was really, really good. He controlled the game. His kicking was brilliant, and then to just have not very many minutes with Munster to come on last week and score 10 points in 7 minutes and pressure free and just look like a natural 10 when he was in there also.
Yeah, it was a big moment for him. It would be interesting if the thought crossed Andy Farrell's mind of just maybe dangling a cap above his head over the next month or so. But look, we'll see how that all plays out. It seems this is the closest or the longest legs that the story has had for a few years. But look, we're gonna have to wait and see on that one. On Munster though, and then Munster and Ulster game. So it was Healy's try and conversion in the last minute that ultimately won it. We've spoken so much in the last few months about game plan with Munster and getting used to a new system and attacking formats and all this sort of stuff, but how important is it for a team's development to just snatch a win like that to win a game that they'd absolutely no right to win? As much as learning these new systems is great and all that, there's so much to be said for just a smash and grab victory.
That's it. And you know what? I think that's what the fans wanted as well, Neil. Even in chatting to people, you know, about the few games against Leinster. Oh, it was so close. We saw the Toulouse game as well. Oh, you know, you could have won it here. I think this was absolutely huge for the fans and especially for the team. Watching that coaching staff in the box, you know, after the final whistle went, they were absolutely ecstatic, hugging each other. There was pressure off because it's those physical games that you shouldn't win. Munster used to win with successful teams. That's when it was those games they were winning and grinding out those victories. And we hadn't seen that side yet. Yeah, we'd seen their game plan and their attacking style, and it was building every week. But we hadn't seen when it got to that cauldron. And especially up in Kingspan Stadium, it's not an easy place to go and win a game like that. So I think it was massive and it was huge for the players as well.
And then just the other part of it as well is doing it without Peter O'Mahony, Tadhg Byrne, even Craig Casey at this stage, and Joey Carberry, the more experienced internationals and probably leaders in the group. Whereas if you look at the Ulster squad, they had obviously mapped things out. They had a far stronger squad on paper than Munster were able to put out. And it was something that was kind of put to Munster early on in the season, that they weren't doing it when those big players were away, that they were, you know, where were the kind of the middle tier players, where were the leaders in that group. I think a game like that on New Year's Day is enormous for them as well, that they've had to step up and kind of grab a game by the scruff of the neck when the usual suspects like Peter O'Mahony and Tadhg Byrne aren't around to do it.
Yeah, that was it. And I thought, you know, Jack O'Donoghue had been quiet at times this season, but I thought he absolutely put his hand up for Munster, especially catching that kick from the restart, you know, was behind him. It was just the players, you could see the want, they just ground deep for one another. You know, they put phases and phases together. It was near the last, maybe after that Ulster try, maybe 67 minutes, you thought they're not good. These players aren't going to come back from that. But they absolutely stuck in it 100%, were with each other, and it was huge for them to be able to come up with those big moments and have line out accuracy, and everything just seemed to go to plan. But it's the character of these players, and especially in the pack, I thought that they really stood up and took control without the big names, as you said.
And then the flip side is Ulster and just what is going on with them at the moment. It's incredible to think that, you know, 35 minutes into their game against Leinster, it was 21 points to 3 at the start of December, and just the free fall they've been on since. I know they won at Connacht, but they nearly threw that one away as well in the end and nearly gave up a draw. But it's just last season, and this was something we spoke about last week as well, that last season giving up leads in games was becoming a really, really bad habit for them. And it looked at the start of this season like they'd shaken that off a little bit. They'd found themselves in a couple of situations where they were in comfortable leads and put the foot down on the throat and just hammered it home in the final quarter of a game. But saw it against Connacht a couple of weeks ago where they nearly threw it away, and then against Munster to give that up. Like when Balakoon scored that try in the middle of the second half, they looked comfortable. They were by far the better team at that stage in the game. They had the better players on the pitch, and it looked for all the world like they were going to see it out. And I just think of all the heavier defeats they've had in the last few weeks, that this is the one that has the potential to do the most damage, given the psychological blow of it all and the fact that they really, really just threw it away and they were in complete control.
Yeah, that one's definitely got to hurt, I suppose, as well, having gone down and won in Thomond Park, to be at home with as you said, the players they had on the pitch, Henderson, Treadwell, they had their big heavy hitters out there, and definitely watching it 67 minutes after that Balakoon try, you thought, look, they're in complete control, there's no one going to come back there. You just would have to question the mentality. You know, early in the season, I had questioned their defence at times. I thought, especially out wide, I felt like they were really narrow, but I thought physically they fronted up in this game. I think the back row had maybe 120 maybe combined tackles between them. It was absolutely immense, like it was through the roof. And I thought the narrow defence was quite good. But even you spoke about Crowley's line break at that time of the game. I mean, he just stepped around 5-6 players, and obviously it was brilliant footwork and an excellent from Crowley. But as a coach for Ulster, you have to be wondering what is going on out there, and especially in those wider channels defensively, they seem to be leaking meters and leaking gain line out there. This is is going to be huge for them, but it could also be the game that they have to sit down and question and say, Dan McFarland is gonna want to chat about it, because after every game as a coach, you might leave it slide for a couple of games. And we talked about their mentality as well in the past, especially, in that Toulouse game, they weren't seen to be winning these big games. And I think it's definitely something they're going to have to look at, because they started the season excellently, but it's just seemed to these big wins aren't coming anymore. And they've got the players on the pitch that are in form as well, that are playing well for Ireland and playing well at other times.
And the victory obviously coming at a cost then as well. Marty Moore picking up what looks like being a pretty bad knee injury. He looks in a lot of trouble. They haven't given a timeline on it, but they have said it's a significant injury that he's going to be having a scan on. As much a blow for Ulster as it, but a huge blow for the player as well, because he's been in excellent form for a year or so now, and had got half a foot back in the door with Ireland over the last few months. And had been involved in the A game. It certainly felt like he was an outside shot of potentially sneaking back into a World Cup squad after a long exile from Test rugby. So just a huge blow for him as much as it is for Ulster.
Yeah, massive. And I remember watching the match and seeing him down on the ground, and that's exactly what was running through my mind. How he's gone about his business quietly. He obviously was out of form. He left, he went up to Ulster. He had a couple of injuries, but he's just been playing really, really well. Obviously his carries have been good, but his scrummaging has come on massively. He's, Ulster at times in the past, maybe on that tight head side might have lost a few meters, but he's just been so good. And for a player that's been kind of knocking on the door, and we know going into a World Cup, there's extended squads, there could be injuries, and he was definitely someone in that position that could potentially have gotten a late call up even. So it's absolutely heartbreaking for him.
Yeah, it really is. And best wishes to him on his road to recovery. Moving back to Leinster and Connacht. And more so on Connacht. I was doing that game on Sunday evening, and it was just alarming at times, the game plan of Connacht. Like last season, we were looking at a team that had this fast, relentless, adaptable motto. They were absolutely thrilling to watch every single week. And it seems this season they've become a side. Okay, their defense is a lot better. I know they shipped 41 points the other night, but the game just kind of got away from them in the second half. Defense has been better. Set piece has been really, really good. They absolutely took Leinster's line out apart in the opening half, and their scrum was perfectly solid all game. But it seems as if every single time they get the ball now in their own half, they have no other thought other than kicking it miles down the pitch. And it's not even, there isn't a good kick chase to go along with it. They're not pinning them down into corners. They're not getting the ball into touch. It just seems kicking it down the pitch and hoping the other team are going to make a mistake with it. And Leinster aren't going to do that. I was doing commentary last week, so I was looking at the stats, and even these are the updated ones. If you look at the most kicks in play from any player in the URC this season, Jack Carty on 116, you have to go all the way down to 77 for the second player on that list. That's more than a 50% jump on top of Thomas Williams, what Jack Carty has. He's kicked for 4,432 meters in the league so far this season. Second place is Jordan Hendrickson with 2,700. A 1,700 gap between first and second in kicking meters. And okay, if it was working, you'd be inclined to say, okay, fair enough, do it again, if there was an excellent kick chase to go with it. But they don't seem to be getting anything from this kicking game, and they just seem to be going with it constantly and constantly and constantly. And then on the flip side, when they got into dangerous positions against Leinster, they looked really, really good. They were threatening them. They were getting decent kind of gain line success. I thought Dara Murray was really, really good, as was his brother Niall in the second row as well. And they were really threatening and scored 2 very, very nice tries off the back of it as well. But it just felt like the aimlessness of some of their attacking play, particularly in their own half, was just incredible.
Yeah, and especially this game, I think, Neil, when I watched it, I couldn't, even you spoke about Carty's kicking meters, but there was absolutely no chance of even collecting the ball again on 90% of their kicks. I think he had 29 kicks from hand in the game, and I would say probably they recovered 0 of those, I would imagine, almost. You know what I mean? Obviously, there is a game plan there. You would presume he's going on the coaching game plan. I can't understand it. I've seen it in the last couple of games. The kick chase, you'd review games and you'd probably look back at your kick chase if that's what you want to do. If you want to kick to the opposition and you want probably them to kick back to you, you would imagine if they're going that deep, it's that they want them to kick back to them, but it's not happening. And especially that Leinster back three, any Leinster back three at the minute, you wouldn't want to be kicking the ball to them because they're not recovering. So I just can't see it. And I think it's actually affected his game as well. If you talk about, Jack Carty in the last couple of seasons, we've had him in the mix when we're looking at those tens. We've been talking about, Ross Byrne, why isn't Jack Carty getting up there? He's playing immensely for Connacht. I haven't even thought about it this season because I've watched all Connacht's games, and I'm just wondering what he's doing, where the ball, if he's looking for these 50-22s, it's not happening. He's probably got maybe 3-4 max. So it's not even that. It's high up in the air trying to recover these, and it's very deep. And even he doesn't look as confident as he was, because obviously they're returning that ball, and we saw with one of the Leinster tries as well, he lost his footing. So I think the way and the style Connacht are playing at the minute is actually affecting him as a player as well. I presume he's been told to kick that much. You wouldn't be having 50% higher than any other team unless that was in the game plan.
Yeah, and I would assume as well that the plan is to kick deep. I wouldn't say, for example, that he's trying to put up contestables and they're all going 25 yards beyond the target. But what you'd kind of wonder is, why are you kicking so deep into a Leinster backfield of Jimmy O'Brien, Jordan Larmour, and Rob Russell, who seem perfectly capable. Like, I know a lot of the time the plan, if you're doing that, is you're trying to suck them into to rush them into a poor clearance kick, or you might consider that you've got an excellent kind of a counter ruck game. You might want them to run back at you and kind of loosen things up and try win turnovers off the back of it. But Jimmy O'Brien isn't going to be struggling to find touch if you give him 5 or 6 seconds to find it. And likewise, Jordan Larmour is going to be more than comfortable running a ball back to you. So it's even it's the selection of the kicks that they're taking on is what I just find so confusing. But anyway, go ahead, sorry.
No, I was just saying, even on that, Need, as well, even if that was your scenario and you started the game like that, I'm also wondering why halfway through the game it's not working, or why the message doesn't go on, let's change that up. I just felt in that Leinster game it was the same recycled kicks over and over again. It wasn't working, and there was no change in their game plan around that kicking game.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens with the Sharks this weekend, because one thing for Connacht, they just absolutely have to start winning games, and they start winning games quickly now. They're down in 13th position off the back of the Ospreys winning the other day. They're 8 points back from the top 8, but a win against the Sharks and all of a sudden they're right back in the mix again. Now, what's going to happen this weekend against the Sharks? It's actually really, really tough to predict at the moment, because I've been looking around. I haven't seen a list of the Sharks that have travelled over to Galway, for example. So they've got Champions Cup games coming up. They might be viewing this as an opportunity to rest someone like even Etzebeth, Sia Khaleesi, a lot, Bongi Banambi. They're big Springbok stars who really haven't had much of a rest at all for 18 months now. They've pretty much been in a continuous loop of a season for more than a full year now. So if they are rested and they are left back home, it opens the door for Connacht, and I think they've got a really, really good shot, particularly at home, of beating the Sharks. But obviously, if the likes of even Etzebeth and them travel, it could be a long afternoon.
Yeah, it could. And I would imagine, I was thinking the exact same, that they probably will leave these guys at home, especially with Champions Cup coming up. But you just don't know what's going to happen. I know Connacht probably have Bundy Aki and maybe Mac Hansen back as well. And these guys obviously know there's the Six Nations coming up as well. So they're going to be looking to try and get into a bit of form as well. But look, it could be a very long afternoon. But I think this Connacht team are capable. And we saw it in glimpses against Leinster at times with their attacking game. And as you said, their set pieces, probably, we talked about it last year, and guys coming off the bench, and they didn't have that impact off the bench, and now they have all that, but it just doesn't seem to be connecting. And their defensive system is much better as well. Cully's done great work there as well, but for some reason it's not connecting. And I think there's a big change in the back three and how they're counter-attacking with Connacht as well. They don't seem to be getting the gain line or the line breaks that they used to. Even in that Leinster game, I think they'd they kind of had 2 offloads. Last season, we would have seen a lot more than that. So maybe defensively, they've cut down, trying to turn over the ball, and that's affected their attacking game as well a little bit. But look, they have the capabilities there. It's just where they are in the standings. And I looked at that as well after the game. I didn't realize they were so far down, and they're going to have to start getting a few wins under their bag. And the best place they can win, I suppose, is at home. They put out massive performances, and they've done it. Even if the Sharks did bring over the big guns, they have the ability to do that in the sports ground. They can shock teams massively, and it needs to start happening for Connacht this season, or there'll be no Champions or Champions Cup. They'll be in the Challenge Cup.
Yeah, so that's Connacht against the Sharks, 5:15 this Saturday evening at the Sports Ground. Live coverage on RT2 and RT Player of that as well. The other fixtures this weekend: Munster against the Lions. 3 games in 12 days for Munster. That's a tough one. 7:35 p.m. Friday night at Musgrave Park against the Lions. Benetton hosting Ulster at 1 o'clock on Saturday afternoon. And then the final game of the weekend is in Swansea Ospreys versus Leinster. That kicks off at 7:35 on Saturday evening. Fiona, thanks a million for joining us. Best of luck this weekend in the first game of the Interpro Series.
Great stuff. Thanks, Neil. I'll be at the Munster game on Friday, and then I'll be going back again for my own game Saturday. Can't wait.
Very good. That's Fiona Hayes. And coming up next, we'll be speaking to Ireland International Andrew Porter. And you're very welcome back to the RTÉ Rugby podcast. I'm delighted to be joined now by Ireland and Leinster prop Andrew Porter. Andrew, Happy New Year. Thanks a million for joining us on the pod.
Thanks very much, Neil. Happy New Year. You all well?
I'm very, very good. I'm very good. You're here, Andrew, today on behalf of the Tackle Your Feelings schools program. You've been involved with Tackle Your Feelings for a while now, and obviously coming in off the back of the Christmas and New Year period, it's probably a pertinent time to be talking about that. It's a time when a lot of people around the country be feeling particularly vulnerable, but this is something that obviously has been close to your heart for a long time.
Yeah, definitely. Like it's such an incredible initiative to be part of, and it's definitely something that's it's affected me in the past in terms of my own mental health. But it's, like I said, it's an incredible initiative, and to be a part of something like this, to be able to help so many people. I think it's had maybe nearly 25 million hits since its start in 2016. So it shows how kind of valuable it is to people, and how much it's grown, and how much this whole conversation about mental health is growing as well, and how much more I think people are getting more and more comfortable to talk about their mental health and their mental well-being. And I think the app, which is free on the App Store, by the way, for people to download, and the Google. It's an incredible way for people to help manage their own mental health, and to figure out why am I having a bad day? Why am I feeling the way I'm feeling? So it's incredibly empowering for people to be able to get a grasp of their own kind of emotions, and to understand why they might be feeling the way they're feeling.
And Tackle Your Feelings is something that's been around for a few years now, but in the last few months, the school side is a part that you've really focused in on. From your own personal point of view, that must be a very kind of empowering thing, a very kind of a heartwarming thing to focus in, because that's when you experience your tough times when you were, 6th class or secondary school.
Yeah, 100%. Like it's incredible kind of seeing the work the TYF schools program is doing. It's getting that conversation about mental health started amongst younger people, and just letting them know it's not like talking about mental health is a strength and not a weakness. And kind of teach them how to deal with it, with day-to-day kind of challenges, whether it be schoolwork, it be stuff at home, whether I know like social media plays such a big part in people's lives nowadays, and how much it can affect people's mental well-being. But like it would have helped me, I think, understand and be able to kind of open myself back when I was kind of going through tough times, back when I was in first and second year. Like it would have definitely been hugely beneficial to me if it was available to me back then. But then again, I also had a great support network of family and friends around me, but I just I never. It was like I felt like I was on my own, even though I had a great support network of people who were more than willing to help me out and to talk to me. I think I was just like, oh, I don't want these people to carry the burden that I'm carrying. I don't want to shove my problems off on someone else. So it's I think that conversation about mental health and kind of being able to kind of unburden yourself is becoming a lot more normalized, and the whole stigma around it is kind of it's dissipating, but I think it still lingers a small bit. But I think the more and more people are talking about mental health, which the Tackle Your Feelings schools program allows people to do, it's incredible.
You mentioned your support network there, and in the video that you released today, you obviously speak about it a bit more, like your dad and your sisters and your fiance and even your dog as well.
Yeah.
You obviously had a big moment in the last couple of weeks, like your 100th game for Leinster on St. Stephen's Day down in Thomond Park against Munster. Did you have many of that support network, many of the family and friends get down to see you hit that mark?
Yeah. Like, my family came down for the big day, and I had a load of family and friends watching from all over the country, and it was an incredible day. Like, it's like I try not to build it up too much for myself, just so keep my nerves kind of at bay. But like, it's incredible kind of how they've kind of amounted over the last couple of years. Like, I remember my first cap like it was yesterday. I remember against Treacy and coming on with Mike Ross in the front row when I was a loose head. Then obviously I switched it high, and now I'm back to loose head. So I got full circle with that. But yeah, like, it's incredible the experiences I've gained and the ups and downs of the game that I've experienced over the years, and hopefully many more to come.
Yeah, only another 180 odd to pass out Devon Toner, I think, is it?
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough number to beat, but
you've had a busy period. Like, I'm looking back, you played 12 matches already this season, which is probably more than you probably would most seasons at this point, including coming on New Year's Day there. I presume are you on a bit of a down week at the moment? Are you getting a bit of a rest?
there's no rest for the wicked now. Like, yeah, like I was involved over the Christmas period, but look, yeah, look, I was more than happy to be involved every game. I'm such I've such pride, and I'm so privileged to be part of such a group, because you obviously know of James Treacy, who unfortunately had to retire recently. So you can't take for granted what you're doing. You can't, like, this. I'm so lucky to be playing this game, and you don't know when your last game is going to be. Like, it really put into perspective how grateful I am to be doing what I'm doing, and you never know you're going to step on the field for that last time and step on that training pitch for the last time. So any game I play, I'm so grateful to play and be a part of, because it's a tricky sport. Like, it's given the risks that are involved in it. Like I said, yeah, you could be stepping on that pitch for the last time, so you have to savor every minute of it.
And you're coming into obviously a huge year, both for Leinster and for Ireland as well, like the World Cup in September. How much excitement do you have, like, ticking over the calendar from 2022, and all of a sudden 2023 is there in front of you? And, like, naturally, I presume the mind kind of drifts a little bit out towards the World Cup and the things you hope could happen over the course of the next 12 months.
Yeah, like, that's the thing. You have to try not let it happen. You have to try kind of keep your mind from wandering too much, and kind of focus on the present, and not let kind of what's happening further down the road kind of take over. So you have to, like, we have there's a huge game against Ospreys this week, and then two huge games in Europe, and then the 2 weeks after. So, and then we're into Six Nations. Hopefully, need to get selected for that first. But yeah, it's a huge couple of months for Leinster and for Ireland as well. But yeah, like, I'm very much in the mindset of trying to short term, and then we'll see what happens. Then we'll see what happens down the road. So not looking too far down the road yet.
Yeah, no, we won't. And on a personal note level, though, like I mean, if you to look back in your career, you're 26 now, and you're kind of an established senior player both with Leinster and with Ireland. If you look back on 4 years ago, coming into 2019, when obviously it's you're hoping to make a World Cup squad and you're a relative rookie in the Ireland camp and things like that, how much do you think you've changed as a player and a person over those 4 years?
Yeah, I think it's definitely something that you like. Your experiences really shape who you are and who you become. Like it's definitely something that you constantly have to work on mentally, like in terms of how things can affect you. Obviously, like you said, I was relatively kind of inexperienced maybe when I was in 2019 coming into that World Cup, but given the experiences I've had with Ireland and Leinster, and given the kind of experience I've had through injury, which has kind of opened my mind up to new things. Like it was only when I broke my foot before the Lions tour where I made the decision to switch back to loose heads. So I think everything really kind of everything happens for a reason in that sense, and it's really kind of it's definitely kind of my I wouldn't say my persona, but my kind of my outlook and I think my personality has changed in terms of my growth. I'm always looking to improve, like our coaches always talk about a growth mindset and kind of constantly evolving and constantly trying to get better. So that's really what I'm trying to do.
I always thought that was a great flex, getting selected for the Lions as a tight head and then saying, I'm done with that now. I'll go over and play loose. But you've been back on that side of the scrum now for 18 months or so. How are you finding things now? I remember you were speaking to the media just before the Autumn Nation series, and you said you were starting to, get to grips with it a little bit again. Are you enjoying being back over there? Are you feeling more comfortable with the scrumming and the technical side of things?
Yeah, 100%. Like it's that's the thing when you're a prop, like you're always constantly challenged by kind of by new things, like because you're always coming up against completely different style of scrummager in a tight head, or a different pack, or something like that, or like it's something you constantly have to work on. It's a constant learning thing. Like there's never a dull moment when you're a prop. Like you're constantly learning. Like it's like if I compare myself and like Jemison Gibson Park, like we're playing two different sports, lad. It's like we're playing two different sports. It's like he's a distance runner and I'm some strong man trying to shift a truck or something like that. But like it's really kind of it's definitely constantly learning from your training. Obviously, we have incredible players in Leinster and Ireland that you can learn from, and then obviously learn from your games and everything like that as well. So
you try bring your tight head experiences back to it, as in if you're trying to think, well, what when I was a tight head, what are the things I did not want a loose head doing to me?
Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, like that's how it kind of benefited me in a way of going to switching back. You just like, oh, what did I hate? What did a loose head do? What did I hate? Like, yeah, like it really kind of it's those experiences and those kind of learnings that really shape you as a player.
There were a couple of difficult days with it last year. The Leinster and Ireland scrum. There were just a couple of games when the opposition got on top of you. Were there ever moments in the last year or so where you did wonder, did you make the right decision switching across?
Yeah, like you always have, like you're always going to have that lingering kind of doubt sometimes if things aren't going your way. Like you're always going to have that kind of voice in the back of your head saying, "Oh, geez, what's going on? Why can't I fix this?" And then like then you just sit down with your teammates, your coaches. You can literally leave no stone unturned, and then you can find the root of the problem fairly quick. Then when you actually figure out something's not right, and it could be a tiny little fix up. It could be something so small in terms of like an angle or like how high you are on your hooker or something like that, like in a technical, if you're getting technical or anything. But like it's sometimes like even a small change could make just a huge difference, and I think that's goes for a lot in life, not just in rugby. I think small changes in whatever you're doing can make a huge difference to your life as a whole.
Yeah, I think people underestimate the front rows. They might be big and burly, but they're the biggest nerds out there at the end of the day.
Biggest nerds, and we're very
small little angles, the small little
we're
things.
very emotionally intelligent people. We're like, what's the way to describe us? I wouldn't know. Right here, look.
Unique,
People might be able to tell me. Some people might be able to describe it better than I would, but I've been told we're very emotionally intelligent people.
Final question for me. With both Leinster and Ireland, the kind of standards have been set so high in recent years that, like, even with Leinster, for example, it's 13 games out of 13 so far this season, and ultimately you're still just going to be judged on what happens in May or June. How do you kind of deal with that pressure? And similarly, from an Ireland point of view, that, you know, whatever happens in the Six Nations, people will still be thinking, okay, well, it's all about September and October. How do you deal with that kind of pressure?
Well, that's the thing, really. Like, it's all this unbeaten run with Leinster and Ireland mean nothing if we don't end up with silverware, because that's what you're playing for at the end of the day. Is you're playing for that fifth star in Europe with Leinster. You're playing for that Six Nations championship. You're playing for, and then you're playing for the URC title, and then you're also playing ultimately at the end of the year for a World Cup. So that's all that really matters. Like, when it comes down to it at this level, well, like, winning is what matters, and that's what you are judged on. But I think it's what you do in the season really helps build momentum into the business end of the season as well. So, like, that's why it's incredibly we'll take great confidence from our past performances and how we're going at the moment, and we'll keep carrying that throughout the season into the business end of the season, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, certainly do. Andrew, thanks a million for joining us, and Happy New Year. Very best luck with the rest of the season.
Thanks very much, Neil. Take care, Andy.